So on your sheet, on the Karen, it's actually, I think is it called sexuality? Okay, so we're gonna separate, because that's too narrow, right? That's part of it. We wanna think about intimacy as part of being the Karen, on this Karen. We thrive when we feel deeply, meaningfully connected. Deeply and meaningfully connected. We thrive when we feel seen, heard, understood. We thrive when we feel valued, cherished, and adored. So connection and validation, really, really important. So do you take care of yourself in this arena? Do you take care of yourself? You know, if you're partnered with someone, do you feel deeply, meaningfully connected? Because that actually takes effort. You know, that I'm always surprised at when two people come together, and I'm going to officiate a wedding this weekend, and you know, I'll watch them get married, and then I'll think, okay, so what happens tomorrow? What happens after the big party? You know, because I've had couples say, yeah, what happened after the big party? We woke up and we looked at each other like, oh shit, now what? We didn't think about that part. Seen, heard, understood, valued, cherished, adored. Like, am I treasured by someone? That's part of this intimacy stone, and it doesn't have to be a significant other. Are there people in your life that you feel really treasure you? That validation is a human need. We thrive when we are touched physically and emotionally on a regular basis. In other words, do we allow ourselves to receive? The podcast I was listening to this morning was cutting edge research on touch. Human touch. What do we know about babies who are born prematurely and how they thrive in the NICU unit? They are touched regularly by the NICU nurses. It's part of their job. A premature baby can grow and mature very, very quickly with adequate amounts of touch. That's why that skin-to-skin contact is really important. Does anyone here know what the average time frame is for a hug that really matters? There's a lot of this, even between couples. It's what I call the A-frame hug, right? Maybe chest to chest, but everything else, the A-frame hug. So average hug where you like therapeutically, biologically, neurologically, emotionally calms the central nervous system. 90 seconds. That's so long. I feel like I was having a conversation. One of my favorite authors on intimacy, David Sharnak, wrote a book. I usually give this to people that I marry. It's called Passionate Marriage. And there's an entire chapter or section of the book that's exclusively about hugging. And he talks about couples who are in trouble doing a lot of the A-frame hug. So an A-frame hug is appropriate in a professional context. If you hug in the professional context, I don't recommend.
I did hug. Yeah, we did.
Yeah, and I don't recommend a 90-second between the two of you. It'd be a little weird. So the hug that he recommends for the couples that want to increase that stone and the strength of that stone is full frontal. So heart to heart, genital to genital, head to head, close. 90 seconds. And the reason he recommends 90 seconds, because for couples who are in trouble, they have become afraid and untrusting of that kind of contact. So it takes about 90 seconds for them to even start to relax into that, because the first 30 seconds might be, get me out of here. Because one or both of them are already thinking, get me out of here, this relationship, get me out of this house. So when you start to lengthen it, it becomes very therapeutic. And what we know physiologically is it starts to stimulate that oxytocin. Remember oxytocin from our meditation series? Oxytocin is the bonding hormone. It's real. That's why people who are falling in love and we see them and we're like, God, you make me sick. How does that even, is that true? Like, are you really that into each other? Are you really that high? Yeah, they are. There's lots of oxytocin because there's probably high touch, a lot of high touch. So, we can't always have that in our lives, but if you are partnered with someone, practice that. And if that person isn't here, if it's not somebody in this room and doesn't know about this, go home, take them into the 90-second hug, and chances are they're going to say, what the hell's wrong with you? What's going on here? But, and you might say, I learned something, really important about the therapeutic value. And similarly, if you have a child, if you have, a body that you can bring in close. And if you don't, we recommend for this touch that is stroke-like. So a stroking, when you think about, my grandmother always did this when we were kids. And I always felt like she put me into a trance. She would always do this to our hands. Or when someone brushed your hair, but that long stroking sort of sensation is highly therapeutic. If you don't believe me, do it on a pet and watch your animal just, come into a complete relaxed trance-like state. But going back to this, we thrive when we are touched physically and emotionally touched. You know how you feel. When someone does something emotionally, you are just so moved by it on a regular basis. That is, I'm open to receiving this kind of intimacy, and I'm open to giving. We thrive when we love to love. We thrive when we love the act of caring for someone. We thrive when we give. So in the context of a relationship that you would qualify or that constitutes what you would say is intimate, when was the last time you gave uninhibitedly, which means I gave without wanting anything back? There was no motivating factor behind my giving except to give, knowing that I do benefit from my own well-being. I increase the strength of that stone. I would say that when I guide people through the Karen, this is the stone that is most neglected, especially for couples that have been together for a really long time. They're like, wow, oh my God, we've been together 25 years. And this stone is just, it's been on the back burner. So temperature taking, you probably have all heard this. Temperature taking is, hey, I learned something today, and on a really regular basis, maybe once a week, we're going to have a little bit of time, and we're going to take the temperature. And the temperature is, where are we at? How are you feeling? This is how I'm feeling. It's engaging in what we call meta communication. Meta-relational communication. That's communication about us. Communication about the relationship. You can do this in your colleague-to-colleague relationship, especially if you work really closely to someone. How are we doing? Don't preface it with, we need to talk. Don't do that. But hey, let's try this. I want to point you in the direction. I'll send you the link for this. There's this amazing tool called the 36 questions. That'll be in an email for you to just click on. The 36 questions is a list of questions. They're fun. You can have date night or whatever, and you're with your special someone. You say, we're gonna play 36 questions. These are very provocative questions that increase in intensity as you move through them. So it's important that you go through them in order. And just know that they stimulate so much conversation that you will rarely get through 3 to 5 during a whole, like if you do this over a dinner date. Oftentimes when you hear reference to the 36 questions, and you can use them with anyone, you can use them in groups and teams, you can use them in friendship, parent-child if the child is of a certain age, but they're a great way to bring attention back to intimacy. A lot of times you'll see with the 36 questions that lead to love. And what they mean by that, and actually the story behind the 36 questions is interesting, but what they mean by that is how they restore or have the potential to restore connection. Because when you ask these questions of each other in a really genuine way, you're really asking to be known a little more deeply by someone who knows you, but can never know all of you. And when I ask you a question from the list, I'm expressing very authentically my need to know you more deeply. You may not want to admit this within yourself, but it's true. We all long to be known. We long to know and we long to be known, which is why I say dating 101 advice. Ask a lot of questions, because people like the invitation to have their story brought forth. And many of us aren't just going to offer that, but if we're asked the right questions and the interesting questions, we will. To stimulate your ability to strengthen this stone, also on the back counter, there are these little postcards taken from something called 52 lists for connecting with loved ones. It's a postcard, and on the back of the postcard, like for example, one of the postcards says, "The strengths I see in you." And when you turn it over, it'll say, "The strengths I see in you," and it gives you space to write down 5 things. And you pop it in the mail and you send it to someone that you love and care about, or you give it to your partner. And I encourage you to buy them. They have them over at Barnes & Noble. They look like a photo album, and you take them out and you can just put them into, your partner's lunch, or send them randomly to someone that you really care about as a way of nurturing intimate relationships. I'll quickly come through this. Spirituality is on your stone. For some of us, spirituality can be linked to religious practices or a religion that we are part of. It can also be linked to other kinds of practices that we engage in on a regular basis to strengthen our connection to whatever you might call it, God, the divine, the universe, truth, love, beauty, whatever it is, that's something that is really bigger than us. But when I talk about spirituality, I really like to talk about how often are you getting yourself into a flow state, a state where you are in the moment of awe, you are in a moment of, wow, this is just mind-blowing, this human existence is mind-blowing, or that you are in this sense of grandeur, like looking at a sunset, or being somewhere like the Grand Canyon and looking around and thinking, I cannot believe that this exists here on our planet and that it's coming into my eyes. So do you on a regular basis find yourself in an experience where you're just lost in something, where you've lost sense of time or place, where you feel fully present? Does anybody have a practice like this? Or can anyone think of an example?
Yeah, so I like to go to Candy Ranch, which is a wellness location, and I would say I'm more frequently able to connect in that way after 3 or 4 days there.
Yeah, and it takes the 3 or 4 days to disconnect from everything that's taking you out of presence to be fully present. And for people who work at that really high pace, they often say, if I'm going to go on vacation for a week, I have to add 3 days on the front of it, because that's how long it's going to take me to come into or to be primed for full presence. And it's probably the atmosphere, it's probably the food, it's probably the fact that you're moving, maybe height, all of these things, the mindfulness, the movement, and the mindset that it inspires, right? Any runners in here?
I was just gonna say that to me is my form of meditation. I do distance running. So for me, I don't go with music, I don't run with people. It's just in and out, focus on breath, gets me to relax, reset, kind of combines everything we're talking about here.
Absolutely, yeah, it's that, so you know the experience of flow and presence through that. Anybody else? You all do. It can be listening to music. For me, it's right now. It's when I teach. Total flow, to the point where I don't know what time it is. I'm glad I looked, because we need a short break. I just want to give you some other examples. Believe it or not, witnessing a birth. Trust me. Probably giving birth. Are you thinking about anything? I've never given birth, so I don't imagine you're thinking about much else but the act. But I do remember watching my nephew being born. And in high school I had seen movies of babies being born, but there's something about seeing my nephew being born. It was one of those experiences of, I don't know what time it is, I don't know what day it is, I don't know anything outside of the fact that, oh my God, I can't even believe this. Just the awesome nature of it. There's only one other thing that I've ever experienced that I would say is similar, and that is the moment of watching another person take their last breath. And I have had the honor of working in hospice. I don't do that anymore, but I've done that quite a bit. And I always felt what a special moment, equally as awe-inspiring and mystery, and just like, wow, this is amazing. Total flow state. Loving and being loved, making love with total presence can connect you to that flow state. Being in the presence of our pets, being in that flow state, right? Art, music, movement, formal practices like prayer, meditation. That's why I'm so called to meditation. It brings me into that flow state, being in beauty, being in nature. When you think about the things that you love to do, places you love to be, ask yourself, am I loving this because I'm in flow state? Because I am in touch with something just feels bigger than me. Another stone that's often neglected. Purpose. We'll talk more specifically about this when we get to the motivation section of emotional intelligence, but inherent to our well-being is our ability to make things meaningful. Viktor Frankl, who I will talk about later today, later in the session, wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. He has a very interesting history as a Holocaust survivor. But what really came out of his time as a Holocaust survivor was, I got to make this mean something. In order to go on, I've got to make this mean something. And when he went into Auschwitz, he was a very renowned, well-known psychiatrist, very, very well-respected Hungarian psychiatrist. And he came out and he developed what we know as logotherapy, L-O-G-O, logotherapy. And logotherapy is the therapeutic act of making your life meaningful. So when something really difficult happens or challenging happens, it was his belief that as human beings, just as we need air and water and food and shelter, we also have an inherent need to make things mean something, so we don't feel like we're living through things in vain. And that individuals who will cope very, very well through difficulties, tragedies, are those that understand this. Now, they might not understand it in terms of, I'm going to do some logotherapy on myself, but that they understand that this must mean something, this must have a larger purpose behind it. So when we think about our purpose, right, we want to think about our human need to make things meaningful. Just a couple of quick practices, and you might want to write these down. I'm not sure if they're in the packet or not. This can contribute to therapeutically. You're going through something really difficult. So I want you to think about someone in your life that's really difficult, that you just think, I wish I could eliminate you from the whole picture that's my life. If I want to use this experience with this person therapeutically, I ask myself, in what way? What's your name? Rachel. In what way, let's say Rachel is that for me. In what way is Rachel one of my greatest teachers? Boy, that flips things upside down, right? Because we want to think about our greatest teachers as someone we love, right? And we have positive feelings for. In what way are you my greatest teacher? Try that sometime. Wow, is life happening to me? Or is life happening for me? Life happening to me. Oh, there's all these external circumstances that are occurring to me, which puts us in victim consciousness. Versus, there are all of these things happening for me. That's a tough one, trust me. But put it in your back pocket as a tool. I have to versus I get to. I have to go to the gym today at 4 o'clock. I get to go to the gym today at 4 o'clock. I have to give this presentation on emotional intelligence today. I get to give this presentation on emotional intelligence today. I have to help my kid with algebra tonight. I get to help my child with algebra tonight. Every time you practice this, just practice it for a week, and you will become acutely aware of how many times you say, I have to, versus I get to. What does that reframe do for you? I have to go to the gym today at 4 o'clock. Grateful. I get to. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, lots of times.
Yeah.
More positive outlook.
It changes the energy of all of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Purpose. What makes you feel most alive? Anyone have an answer for that? Just name something that makes you feel really alive.
Exercise.
Do more of that. What makes you feel most alive? Someone else.
Being outside.
Do more of that. Mm-hmm. What makes me feel most alive? Travel. Do more of that. Right? There's always kernels of truth and clues in what makes you feel most alive that links you to purpose. And we'll talk about purpose when we get to motivation in a different kind of way. Okay. Relationships. Listen to this. We thrive in relationships that are safe, that generate growth, that are fulfilling and have clear boundaries. I will thrive, you will thrive in a relationship that feels safe to you, where you're growing, where you feel fulfilled, and that there's clear boundaries. And the boundaries part is how you feel protected. So a really powerful tool, and I'll send you this whole list, but I want to just highlight 7 things really powerful tool for taking care of yourself relationally, in a peer-to-peer relationship, colleague, romantic relationship, whatever it is, any kind of relationship that matters to you, is to become very aware of and to practice what are known as the relational Bill of Rights. As human beings, we have the Bill of Rights that we honor and respect, or we should honor and respect. But what would it mean for there to be a Bill of Rights that existed for our relationships and for us to honor and respect those? So I want to read to you from the Relational Bill of Rights. I'm only going to highlight 7. And just take these in and ask yourself what mattered or what really kind of landed for you in a really significant way. I have the right to be treated with dignity and respect at all times, no matter my age, role, or stage in life. Meaning, I have the right to be treated with dignity and respect, whether I am my 4-month-old infant nephew, my 53-year-old self, or my 98-year-old grandmother who's got late-stage Alzheimer's and is in Wesley Village. That child at 4 months old, that woman at 53, that woman at 98 that does not have her mind deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. Do you see? Uncompromising. I have the right to say no as a complete sentence. I have the right to say no and not follow it up with why. I have the right to say no and feel no guilt. I have the right to take time for myself. I have the right to ask for what I want. I have the right to leave conversations with people who make me feel diminished, humiliated, put down. I have the right to say, I'm afraid. I have the right to end a relationship. I have the right not to be responsible for other people's behaviors, actions, feelings, or problems. I have the right to make decisions based on my feelings, my judgments, my values, or anything I choose. Last one. I have the right to be happy. I have the right to be happy. Now, can you imagine, there's 25 of them, I just highlighted 7, the ones that I think have the most power. If you expected in your relationships that those rights would be honored, and if you conducted yourself in a way with other people where you honored those rights in them. Because there's 2 ways of looking at this. I fundamentally, as a human being who is living and breathing, deserve all those things. And it is my responsibility to make sure that I'm treating you in a way that I honor those rights in you, regardless of your age, your stage in life, your role, whatever it is. What mattered most to you when you heard those? If there was one that really stood out.
To allow people to express themselves in the way they want to. I also thought though about the word no, and how in sales that's not a good word to hear, but and we always ask why, but yeah, those 2 things there. But now just to give value to people. People can make their own mind up, and it's okay.
Yeah.
No. No. No follow-up. I shouldn't have to have a follow-up.
Yeah. Guess who has follow-ups most of the time? Men or women?
Women have to
It's very
justify.
gendered. It's very gendered. And that's not always across the board, but more so women will say, no and feel like they have to give, not as a complete sentence. The other thing, I noticed this yesterday at Wegmans, this was put on my radar. How often women say I'm sorry. And so I was going around Wegmans yesterday morning, and at least 6 women said they were sorry, and I almost said, for what? You know, maybe they were just sort of moved out of the way, but be careful with I'm sorry as well, and start getting a radar for listening to that. So yeah, no is a complete sentence. Was there one that really resonated with you?
The dignity when they're being treated with dignity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Candy?
No,
Mm-hmm.
without an 8-sentence long answer.
Yeah. Try it. If you tend to give the explanation, you'll feel like you have to put your hand over your mouth because you're gonna want to.
There was a thing about allowing others to, what was it? To either enjoy or not enjoy things, or like or not like things, something
Yeah,
like
to
that.
feel. I have the right to feel how I feel, to like what I like, and the same is true for others.
Yeah, it's me.
For whatever reason I choose.
I'm manic about making sure everybody else is happy or
Mhm.
enjoying themselves.
Yeah.
So that's a hard one for me to look at. Everyone should be treated with dignity.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having a hard time remembering some of them because no being a complete sentence is the 3rd time I've heard that in the past couple of days. So now I'm wondering why.
3's the magic number. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Enough.
I'd say the dignity and respect, but only because of my position in the company. I'd say like position-wise, my age typically has an impact on position, so being treated with respect and dignity within the company is huge.
Yeah, and I left age out. Well, age, stage of life, yes,
Yeah.
that's really important. So regardless of your age, you deserve to be treated with the same dignity and respect afforded to someone who's been here much longer or who is much older.
Agreed.
Yeah.
For me, it was no.
Yeah.
For me, it was the reminder that I'm not responsible for other people's problems or decisions or mishaps.
Yeah, that usually comes up as a big one in trainings. Like people will say that when really they're like, I'm not, and then you start to realize how often you feel that way.
That was 100% it for me, the same one, especially because of the position being in a leadership position. You always want to make sure people underneath of you thrive and are doing well, but also you have to realize there's only a certain amount you can do, and then at that point they have to do it for themselves. You can leave them the water, you can't make them drink it, essentially.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Good.
Mine was the right to ask for what I want and or deserve.
In a really clear and direct manner.
Sure.
When you think about those moments where you are asking for what you want and what you need, and how we beat around the bush, like how would life be if we were just very clear and direct about it? Really different.
No.
And it might be, No. Oh boy, I just created a monster.
Then you get no with no explanation.
I like the one, it said something like I could walk away from conversations or something that make me feel ridiculed and whatever. I always thought codependency was just in a relationship, but it's like in a romantic relationship, but it's not. It's like, so when I feel like I want to be liked, I stay longer than like my self-esteem allows sometimes.
Yeah. Wow, that's yeah. And that's a perfect comment, because it reminds me to think about those moments where you stayed in a relationship or in a conversation long past when you should have left, and why, and then how you feel when you do leave or when it does end. Remember the stress response 3 F's. Does anyone remember what they are? Fight. What's the flight. Freeze. The freeze, like the gentleman I talked about, his boss is in his face and he just freezes, or the animal who freezes because they're in threat. So a new F has been added, a fourth F has been added. I may have talked about this last time. And it's fawn, F-A-U-N. That to survive the situation, I might fawn all over you. I might just shower you with affirmation and do whatever I need to do in the conversation, in the relationship, to get either to where I need to be or to stay safe. Think about how stressful that is. Like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm saying this or doing this with this person, staying in this conversation with these people to survive whatever it is. When you fawn, and fawning takes a tremendous amount of energy, and then you leave, you usually feel very bad. You know, some of us feel like, someone once said, when I'm in that stress response of fawning, I feel like I have to leave and go take a shower. That's how toxic it felt. So I'll send you, you want to see the Relational Bill of Rights in full, right? And I encourage you to print them out and to put them somewhere and to look at them every day. Or maybe you just have a practice where once a week, you just work with one and you just start noticing, not only is this right being honored from all these people in my life, and the other side of it, and this is the tough side, is are there times when I don't treat someone with dignity and respect? You know, are there times where I'm violating these? That's a real eye-opener. But it's a way of increasing that musculature of self-awareness. Okay? All right, finally, if you look at the bottom of the Karen, what do we have there? She calls it the inner pilot light. And I think I told you, I'm not crazy about that. That word never worked for me. But what you want to think about there is that inner voice, that inner wisdom, that gut instinct, that which is always there, which is always pointing you usually in the right direction. And I think the example I gave is, call it your inner GPS system, right? When the GPS system came out, I was crazy because I didn't trust the GPS. So I would be driving with the MapQuest printed out in my lap and listening to the GPS. Like my sister, she's got the GPS and Waze going at the same time. She doesn't quite trust the GPS, which makes for insanity. And ultimately, unless there's something wrong, most of the time you don't follow the GPS, what? You're lost. You're not getting to where you want to go, to where you need to be. Just like if I don't have a sense of ease in all of these areas of my life, it clouds my ability, it impacts negatively my ability to really hear that inner knowing that's there. That intuition, that guidance, it cuts me off from it. Stress will cut you off from that. That cognitive and emotional hijacking will cut you off from that. And so Lissa Rankin's theory is that it actually all starts there. Your wellness in all of these stones, your well-being in all of these stones is really contingent upon the degree to which you're connected to that part of yourself. Call it whatever you want, but it's there. And you know that you have a clear pathway to it. It's like an opening. It's like a clearing of the fog, but you have a clear pathway to it. When all of these other areas are being tended to, now, we don't have to tend to them in perfect ways. And you might imagine we could spend, an entire day talking about each stone. This was just like a little glimpse into all of them, and they all mean different things to us. And there might be lots of different practices and ideas you can write into your stone. But what I really want you to do is to look at the handout and answer that question. This is a way of getting you started. I am at my best intimately when? Just 3 things. I am at my best creatively when? Just 3 things. And then start asking yourself, are those 3 things happening? You know, maybe I'm at my best creatively when once a week I color for 15 minutes. I don't know, whatever it is. Or I work on, you know, an evolving poem that I'm writing. Or whatever it is. But just 3 things. Just keep it at 3 things. Okay? Let's check on where we are at time, because I think we're nearly over. "10 minutes. Do we have 10 minutes in us? So I just want to launch into self-regulation, and then we'll finish this piece up next time. All right, so once I'm self-aware, that's great. I've got the foundation of emotional intelligence. And I want you to start thinking about people in your life. Once you hear this stuff, you sort of begin to develop a radar for it. So a self-aware person, for example, pretty much has this knowledge that, yeah, there's lots of pieces in my life that all need to be tended to. But self-awareness extended outward means I really understand that I affect other people, how I show up at work, how I show up in my relationship, how I show up as a parent, whatever it is, it affects other people. And it really helps if I am, in addition to being self-aware, that I have the capacity to regulate or manage myself. Whatever word you want to use. Self-regulation, self-management. A self-regulated person understands that emotions are really complex. This is one of the reasons why our mindfulness of feelings, we spend 3 whole sessions in the mindfulness meditation training on the feelings part to really get you in touch with the fleeting nature, intense nature of all the feelings that are passing in and out. It's really complicated. So I understand that. That understanding alone helps me to better understand you, right? Nothing is fixed or stable. Knows the value of being responsive versus reactive. That's really what this section is going to be about. Is very aware that I impact others in the way that I speak and what I act and the decisions I make and the way that I enter into a room, that affects others. I love this. A self-regulated person knows when they've screwed up. And they have a capacity to step up and say, you know what, I messed up, and I'm sorry. A willingness to acknowledge, I messed up, no matter what your role is. When a leader or a manager actually apologizes, admits that they've messed up to their team, it is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of humility, which goes a long way with those you lead and manage. They want to know that you are a human being. A self-regulated person understands anger. So the next slide, if I never saw you again, this is what I want you to remember. This is an important side note on anger. Whenever there's anger present, please know that beneath the anger is one or more of these 3 things. Fear, I'm really afraid. Hurt, I'm really hurt right now. Or you betrayed me in some way, or I feel betrayed. And a sense of helplessness. I am truly, utterly not in control of you or the situation. So when I start to feel the stirrings of anger coming up, this was a game changer for me. Start to feel it. Who in here can identify when you know anger is present or is coming? Mm-hmm. Physically. It starts in your body, physiologically. Where is it?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. And mainly my heart.
Yeah.
Because it's hurt.
Change in heart rate. Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Stomach. Me too. It gets me in the gut first. Anyone else? We all have our signature of sort of a,
My throat
throat.
locks up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because oh my gosh, what if I express this? Or what if I don't? So there are these physiological signs. This is why our mindfulness of the body training is so important during that 8-lesson series, right? It gets you back in the body. So I start to feel the stirrings. The first thing I do is I step away. I feel myself stepping away, and I say to myself real quick, all right, in what way right now, Christine, are you afraid? In what way right now are you feeling hurt? In what way right now are you feeling really helpless and out of control? It might be one of those things, it might be two of those things. If it's three, you potentially have rage. If someone's in front of you, rageful, you can almost be certain that they are afraid, they are really hurt, and they feel totally helpless and out of control. So you might say, well, why does that make people angry? It doesn't make us angry. But no, it is much easier. Even if you hate anger, like you just don't like going there, know that for most of us, it is much easier to become angry than to say, I gotta tell you, I am shaking right now because I'm so scared. Or, I feel so hurt. I feel so betrayed. Or, I need you to know that I feel completely helpless and out of control. Can anyone guess why that's harder?
Because people have to get vulnerable to admit that.
Yeah, exactly. We make ourselves vulnerable each time we say something like, I'm really scared, I'm really hurt, and I'm really helpless right now. Much easier to yell, scream, punch, whatever it is, that happens. This side note about anger is really important because it does two things. One is it gets you in touch with, these are the sensations, I'm aware, these are the physiological sensations, anger is present or it's coming. I take a pause, I kind of step away, I run myself through it. So if I can catch that in myself, I am much more apt, because I know this to be true, rather than raging back at someone, to say, you really hurt me. Now, if Tina and I are relating and I say to her, I feel really hurt in this moment, or I feel helpless and out of control, rather than going at her in anger, she's more likely to engage me meaningfully in a conversation about this. Okay? So it works in that way. It keeps you, all of you, in check. But even more is when you're in the presence of another person who's kind of acting out in the anger, you can see them getting angry. What is our default in the presence of someone who's really angry? Especially if it's kind of directed towards us.
Snap back.
Absolutely. It's that stress response. Like, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to fight you. I'm ready to run out of this room. I'm ready to shut down and not speak. Or I'm going to fawn all over you just to get this over with. That's the stress. That's our natural inclination to keep ourselves safe. The more skillful, emotionally intelligent response is see it, feel it in them, and kind of step away, and in your own mind say, okay, in what way right now might he be hurt, feeling helpless, or really afraid? I don't recommend in the moment, unless you have a deal with someone, I don't recommend in a moment of someone in front of you who's really angry saying, okay, in what way are you hurt? Do you feel betrayed? when I say unless you have a deal with someone, this is what I mean. If you go home and teach someone this in your life, where you know, wow, there's a lot of anger here, and you say, look, let's have this tool where when I see you getting, flying off the handle or about to, I'm just going to flat out ask you, are you afraid of something? Did I hurt you? Do you perceive that I hurt you? Do you feel really helpless? But most of the time we don't want to do that with someone, right, who doesn't know this language. But when I kind of step away, even if I'm like the recipient of it, I'm the punching bag here, I better understand you and it. And I'm much less likely to go back at you reactively. I might say something like, it looks and it sounds like you're really triggered right now, so let's let this sit, and maybe we can come back to it in a half an hour. It will change what you say and do. Okay? So, remembering underneath anger, because it's much easier for us to be angry than it is to say, I'm hurt, I'm really afraid, I feel really helpless and out of control. Okay. This is where we're going to leave. And I want you to think about this. This information, this content is in your latest packet that you received today. I want us to launch in next time by having you get a clear sense of what triggers you and who triggers you. Because if I know what triggers me, I can start to prepare myself. So I want you to think, and these are in your packet. I want you to think about this, how you would complete this statement. It makes me crazy when. How would you complete the sentence? Like, it makes me crazy when every Friday when our report is due, you are inevitably late. And it's something we submit jointly. It makes me like nuts, even though I feel I'm emotionally intelligent. Like, well, it just makes you nuts. What does that do? If you can answer this line and write down as much as you can, right? That gives you awareness of what makes you nuts. Who in your life triggers you? Make a list of people. Like there's just certain people that, as evolved as we are, being in their presence just triggers us and puts us in that state where we're less likely to be responsive. That gives you a preventative, meaning, yeah, Thanksgiving's coming up. My mother-in-law is going to be there. Right? I know that, so I can start thinking about how might I more skillfully deal with her this year. This is, I love, who in my life walks me off the ledge when I'm like about to blow it? This indicates support. Like, who's your person? Who do you call when you really need to be talked down or talked out of reactivity? Make a list. I refer to these people as the members of my board of directors of my life. We should all have a minimum of 3 members. The board of directors of your life, those people that you go to when you really need to make a big decision, or you feel like you've lost it, or you're about to. Who sits on your board? The second question, or the second statement, is really important. I don't like myself when. I don't like myself when I'm really short-tempered with my daughter. I don't like myself when I get into an argument with my husband about his career path repetitively. I don't like myself when I'm sitting across from my mother-in-law and I just can't seem to even find a molecule of compassion. The reason that I want you to think about that statement, how would you answer that, is because for 2 reasons. One is it gets you into the mode of, where are the areas where I'm really hard on myself, because they sap a lot of energy. And the more energy that's sapped, the less responsive you can be. that self-criticism, that self-judgment saps a lot of energy. But it also indicates something that's a very powerful trigger for you. And the reason that I share that, and I'll end this, is a few years ago when my son and I were having some issues and we were working in therapy together, the therapist said, we just weren't getting anywhere. And the therapist said, you know, Christine, I don't think you like yourself very much as a mother in reference to this particular issue with your son. And wow, did she nail it? It was like I burst into tears because I was like, that's it. I don't like this part of me that comes forth as a mother in this relationship with my son on this particular issue. So there's an issue here, for sure. But it does not help that on top of it, I don't like myself and the way that I'm handling it. It's a secondary level of stress. It's like being angry or feeling angry and then being so angry because you're angry and you just came out of emotional intelligence training, right? Or you're practice meditation and you're mad at yourself because you're anxious. How can I be anxious, right? So next time when we come in, I want you to have worked through these and to have answers. I won't be asking you to, come forth with your answers, but I really want you to have a clear sense of what triggers you, who triggers you, the criticism that you have about the things that trigger you, and who is on the board of directors. What's your support? Because that hints at support. So we want to have awareness. We want to start implementing some prevention so we're prepared. We want to have support, and we want to know what is the depth of this self-criticism. And all of this primes us for showing up more often than not as a responsive individual as opposed to a reactive individual. Most people we encounter, including ourselves, show up from the moment we wake up in the morning till the time we put our head on the pillow as reactive. But we can increasingly train ourselves into a more responsive mindset. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.